Welcome to the Audacious Living Podcast, hosted by my man, Audley Stevenson, the Odd Man. He'll unpack wisdom and insights from a cross-section of top quality performers in business, media, sports, entertainment, and lifestyle to uncover key elements to help you live your best audacious life ever. So without further ado, here is the Odd Man.
Greetings and salutations. Welcome to another edition of the Audacious Living Podcast. I'm Audley Stevenson, and it's a pleasure to be here once again with all of you to be able to share this audacious way of living. Of course, that's the motto of this program, helping you live your best audacious life ever. And I truly consider it a privilege and a blessing to come here each and every week and share with all of you. And I thank you all our listeners and followers for your incredible support. So thank you right off the bat. Be sure to connect with us through our social media channels. You can follow, like, subscribe, share. Of course, we can be found on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. Running out of fingers here, but you get the point. So please be sure to keep connected to us. Like I said, the goal of this podcast is simple. It's the same thing. We're here to help you live your best audacious life ever. And, we do this through connecting with some amazing guests, and we have some incredible conversations. And today's chat is going to be no different. We'll be joined by international leadership expert and author, Mr. Steve Farber, whose life's work has been dedicated to leadership development for the last 30 years. Steve's a great guy. He's got a fantastic sense of humor and a very engaging and enjoyable delivery style. He's the founder of Extreme Leadership Institute. And like I said, he authored his 4 best-selling books he's got under his belt. In fact, I'll share with you, the first time he and I connected was about 10 years ago when I had a leadership podcast, and he had just written a book called Greater Than Yourself, which was focused on mentoring. And he was a guest on my podcast back then. And, here we are now, fast forward 10 years, and we're back having another conversation, but we've slightly shifted the focus away from mentoring, and we've zeroed in on a concept of love and audacity. And of course, that goes without saying. Those are 2 key components in his radical leap framework. Now, if you're scratching your head and you're going, what the heck are you talking about? Radical leap? Don't worry. I promise you, it will all make sense soon enough. Trust me. Like I said, Steve is a great conversationalist. I think you really enjoy the points he has to make about the importance of how we inspire audacity, how we show love in our everyday lives, not only just in the business world, but in our everyday lives. So I'm going to climb up right now. I think you've heard enough from me, and we're going to give you an opportunity to hear my conversation with Steve Farber. Enjoy. Steve Farber is the founder and CEO of the Extreme Leadership Institute and is the author of 4 best-selling books. Throughout his 30-year leadership development career, Steve has shaken up and redefined the way we look at leadership. The key components of his Extreme Leadership framework involves cultivating love, generating energy, inspiring audacity, and providing proof. Steve will get into all this and more coming up next on the Audacious Living Podcast. First off, I want to thank you for doing this. It's only been about 10 years, like we said, and you haven't changed a bit.
10 years, 10 minutes. Nowadays, what the hell's the difference?
No, it is not. It is not. It's funny when you talk about there's not a whole lot of difference because we're sort of talking in and around the same things. I mean, back then we had a very focused conversation on leadership. And now we sort of, fast forward a bit, and, the Audacious Living Podcast talks a lot about things like boldness and being courageous and taking chances. And of course, with the radical leap and your extreme leadership and all these, the synergies are just there. So it's a natural fit.
Yeah, of course. Well, LEAP is a framework that stands for love, energy, audacity, and proof. So, yeah, I'm a bit of an audacity fan, and I'm not going to say all of its forms, but most of its forms.
For sure. I want to get to Audacity in a bit, but let's you mentioned Leap. Let's kind of start there because I think each of those facets, each of them are interesting facets, particularly when you start off with the love aspect. And love is something that you've been promoting actively. Your book, your podcast are centered around love, and something that I don't think people would necessarily connect at fitting into the concepts of leadership or management. Now we're talking about love.
Yeah, exactly. It's funny because that's what most people think.
Mm-hmm.
That there's going to be a resistance to the idea of love as soon as you put it in the context of business.
Right.
But what I found, and I can't prove this oddly, but what I've found is that I believe that most people already believe that love is just damn good business.
Right.
The problem is that most people don't believe that most people already believe that love is just damn good business.
Right.
So what happens is we all walk around going, yeah, that's a good thing, but I'm not going to say it out loud because people are going to think I'm crazy. Right. So we're all walking around thinking that other people are going to think we're crazy, but it's really, it's a matter of defining it properly. I'm not talking about love as, as affectionate love or romantic love.
Right.
Of course, that has its place, usually not at work. But, love in terms of the connection of our heart to our work. And we want our customers to love what we do for them. We want people to love working with us and for us and around us because that's where the great performance comes from.
Right.
And we can't really make that happen unless we have that connection ourselves first.
Right.
So when we start looking at it in that context and defining it in the right way, then most people are like, yeah, I get that. Right. Just haven't really used that language before necessarily.
And what's important, Steve, why that definition is so important, because then that allows you to understand what it looks like and what the next steps are. So when you talk about it in this abstract sort of thing, you're going, okay, love, but what does that mean? Am I bringing you flowers? I mean, I don't know. But now when you define it, it provides a clearer picture, doesn't it?
It does. And really, it's not even so much how you define it. Mm-hmm. It's how you describe it.
Right.
So the difference is, for me, I don't really get all that caught up in the semantics of it.
Okay.
The question I'd rather answer is, what should love look like in the context of business?
Right.
So, my most recent book is, of course, called Love is Just Damn Good Business. Right. And the reason I called it that is because love is just damn good business, but that's another story. But it's really focused on example after example after example after example, because if we get caught up in the definition, then we never really get around to the practice of it. So, for example, if you think about how often we use the word, like your listeners after hearing our conversation. Right. I'm just I'll speak to everybody directly and say, you're going to start hearing that word a lot more often. Mm-hmm. It's not that it wasn't there before. It's just now you're going to be aware of it. So for me, I love pizza.
Gotcha.
And I've said those words. I love pizza. And I love my wife.
Right.
I love them very differently.
Right.
One I shouldn't love and one I should. So we use the word. I don't sit there and think, well, what do I mean by I love pizza?
Yep.
And what are the distinctions between, we just use it because it's describing some connection that I feel. And the same is true in business, and the same is true in leadership. It's people very easily and freely will say things like, oh, I love working for her.
Right.
I love being at my company.
Yep, that's right.
Then when you stop and say, well, can you define that for me?
No, that's right. We don't think twice about it. We don't question it. We understand it right away. And I think that's kind of an example, Steve, of we sometimes make things more complicated or complex than it needs to be.
We do. So the question instead would be, if you tell me you love working for, a particular leader,
yep.
Question I would ask you is, what is it about that you love? What do you love about her? What do you love about the scenario? Then you hear the specifics. Oh, she's always giving me credit. She's always asking me for, the help that I need. She gives me really great feedback.
Right.
She gives me, discretion to come and go as I please.
Yep.
That's what I'm interested in.
Right.
It's those actions that lead us to say, I love this. I love her. I love this brand.
Yep.
I love this company. That's where the gold comes from.
And I'll tell you what I love about that is the fact that even those examples that you gave, they're really simple. They're not grandiose things, or they're just little, small, considerate, maybe generous things that we can institute that doesn't have to be this big, complex monster. So there we go.
Yeah, absolutely. We do overcomplicate things. And of course, I've been in this field for 30 years.
Yes.
And I'm the first to tell you that these ideas are anything but new. I mean, it's not, I didn't invent love.
Right.
I didn't, that what I just rattled off the top of my head, that list of things that we've been talking about this shit forever, right? The difference is, I think, language, even though I don't want to get caught up in the definition, language is important. And when you put a label such as love on things that we already know, it actually heightens our awareness of it, for one thing, but it also raises the stakes. And it really lets us know that this is really, these aren't just nice to do ideas.
Yeah.
These are profoundly important.
Mm-hmm.
So even if the ideas are not necessarily, or complex, they're incredibly powerful.
Got you. What is the reaction from the leaders that you interact with once you sort of break down, what love is, or your definition of love, if you will? What is their reaction? The light bulb goes off and they're off giving people time off work and letting people go home earlier? What does that look like?
Well, there's a whole spectrum, of course. The first step is the light bulb going off and saying, oh, I get what you mean. Gotcha. I think for a lot of people, there's a knee-jerk reaction that says, this is going to be that California touchy-feely hoo-ha crap. Here comes the kumbaya session. Although I will tell you that I'm actually seeing that less and less as time goes on. There's less resistance to the idea. But once the light bulbs go off, then I think for a lot of people, it's a self-reflection kind of a thing. It's, what can I do differently as a leader?
Right.
And the expansion of that is, what can we do differently as a company? So once it becomes a conscious, intentional objective to create an environment that people love working in, for example, let's create a culture that people love working in, then it's that's where the real change can start to happen.
Gotcha.
But so I think, like anything else, there has to be some kind of a click or an understanding internally. Otherwise, we don't feel any incentive to take action on it. But again, the resistance is not as great as you would think.
Good. That's great. That means the bar is moving, Steve. That there's some progress being made on this. And again, because we said it before, but for the longest time, these concepts weren't associated in the business world. So to hear that is great feedback.
Yeah, and of course, there have been a lot of people who've been advancing this conversation. One of my mentors is Jim Kouzes. Yep. Jim Kouzes and Barry Posner are the authors of the Leadership Challenge, and really significant body of work on leadership. Probably the most significant research on the subject. And back when way back in the olden days, in the 90s, when I was vice president of the Tom Peters Company, it was actually Jim Kouzes who was the president of the company. So he was my mentor in the leadership world.
Yep.
And he was talking about love way back then.
That's right.
And he'd always work it into the conversation.
Yep.
And at the time it was like, and by the way, it's really kind of about love. You know what I mean? And it's just gotten louder. It's gotten more overt over the years. So the only thing that I've done is maybe make it a little bit more overt than some others have.
Yeah.
But Tim Sanders wrote a book called Love is the Killer App. Came out in I think 2003.
Right.
So we're all making progress with it.
Well,
together.
I'll tie this back. I mean, when we spoke 10 years ago, we talked about greater than yourself, which when you look at that, there's some concepts of love that were built into that. Now, I mean, that was very much mentorship focused, but love does exist even in that setting.
Yeah. And in fact, greater than yourself. And, the premise the premise of that book and the practice that I call Greater Than Yourself, or GTY for short, is that the greatest leaders become the greatest leaders by making others greater than themselves. So it is kind of mentoring on steroids. But if you think about that, that is a very specific application of love.
Yeah.
I'm not going to invest myself in another person that way unless there's a connection of the heart.
Gotcha.
So it's just one of the many, answers to the question, what should love look like in the way that we do business?
There you go. We start with love, E for energy, Steve. We're talking, again, that radical leap concept. We're talking about a framework. Let's talk about energy and how important that is and gets us going.
Yeah, energy is the juice that we bring to everything that we do. It's the enthusiasm and the influence that we have on the environment. It's I'm not talking about energy in an abstract metaphysical sort of a way in this context.
Yep.
But we know it. Again, it's like we know it when you experience it. Those mornings where you jump out of bed, and those mornings where you fall out of bed. It's very different. And leaders, we have, make no mistake about it, we all have an impact on the energy around us. The question is, what kind of energy are you generating?
Right.
Or are you generating energy, or are you sucking it out of the environment?
That's right.
Because we've all known those people who are, the energy vampires. They just walk into a room and suck the life out of the place.
That's right.
So to generate energy.
I once heard you ask a question about that. Like, who are you? Are you the energy sucker or the energy giver? Right. And I think that's what it is.
Do you generate more energy when you walk into a room or when you walk out of it? I mean, it's a good question. So really, generate. And by the way, each of these elements of LEAP has a verb in front of it. So it's cultivate love, generate energy.
Yep.
So the question for a leader is, what are you doing to put the right kind of energy into your team, into your culture, and make sure that you're not an energy vampire and sucking the life out of people?
Gotcha.
Pretty simple, right?
Well, and the thing about this is, and again, these are all things that we know, and we can't state this enough, but we know that people are attracted to enthusiasm. We know people want to be around it. We know people like to be around that. So why not put that energy to be that kind of person that people want to be around? Right.
And the thing to keep in mind, of course, is that, if you're listening to this and you're thinking, well, I'm really more of an introvert and I'm kind of soft-spoken, does that mean I've got to, fake it? And the answer is no. This is not about your Myers-Briggs profile. It's not about your personality type. I've known very quiet, very introspective people who generate tremendous energy.
Absolutely.
Because of they express their passion and conviction for what they do, but they do it in their own way, in their own authentic way. Authenticity, of course, is a big buzzword of the day for all the right reasons. This is not about faking. And conversely, I've known people, as I'm sure you have, who are very outspoken, very eloquent, can stand up on a table and deliver a rousing speech and generate zero energy because everybody knows they're full of it. So you've got to do this in your own way, but the impact is the same.
Got you. Let's go on to the next one, because I think it's my personal favorite. Inspire Audacity. And I don't know, where would we be without it, Steve? Audacity.
Yeah. So why is it your favorite?
I tell you, when I look back at sort of how I've lived my personal life and how chances I've taken, and I look at every accomplishment or every sort of success that I've had, personal success that I've had, is because I've taken a risk, I've taken a chance, or I've just figured, well, what the heck, let's give it a shot. And has it always worked in my favor? No, but I still have taken that chance. And maybe, it's almost like you get 3 strikes in baseball, right? So I swung the first time, I didn't hit it. But that second one, when he comes with that fastball, I know what to expect, and I'm more equipped and better prepared for it. So, it's just been a framework of my own personal life and what really works for me and why it's so important.
Yeah, that's great. Every business book will tell us that it's important to take a risk.
Yeah.
Right? Every single one. So the thing is that we all get it intellectually, because we know that just from our own experience as human beings that growth and progress happen as a result of trying new things. And when you're trying new things and challenging yourself, there's a chance that you'll fail, which means that you're taking a risk. I mean, that's the definition of it, right? But it's one thing to have the intellectual understanding. It's another thing to actually do it. So First of all, I do like to define audacity as a bold and blatant disregard for normal constraints in order to change the world for the better. So instead of a think outside the box sort of an approach, it's really more of a what box approach, right? It's the blank sheet of paper approach. And we, at the same time, we do have to take those risks, but we also have to train ourselves to do that from the inside out. And the way that I encourage people to think about it is, let's first understand that audacity, that risk taking, that boldness is scary. Let's just first of all acknowledge that. Because I think what a lot of people feel is, well, I want to take a risk, but I'm scared to, so maybe therefore I'm not a risk taker. No, everybody's scared to take a risk. The question is, it's the old cliche, feel the fear and do it anyway. It's the question is, are you willing to step into that? So if we first just acknowledge for ourselves that this is a natural thing, there's nothing wrong with us, it's the way it's supposed to be, then we could turn it around and we can experiment with it by pursuing it intentionally. So this is what I refer to as the pursuit of the OSM, which is spelled capital O, capital S, exclamation mark, capital M. It stands for the oh shit moment. So whereas love is the impetus that gets us to step up and take the risk to begin with, the OSM is what it feels like when we start to act on it. So what I found is that for a lot of people, myself included, just having that awareness is really liberating, because then I can get that kind of impending OSM feeling when I'm thinking about doing something new or different, or taking on a new business venture or having a difficult conversation or whatever it is. And I feel that OSM go, oh, there it is. Okay, maybe that's a good thing. Maybe it's a sign that I'm about to do something right.
Right.
And oftentimes that's all it takes, is that little shift of kind of reframing the experience.
That's right. I think what I also love about this is that there's two sides of this coin, right? As much as that we're doing it for us and taking that risk for our own benefit, we're also inspiring other people. And I guess that's where we talk about inspiring audacity.
Yes.
Because if you can show people and others around us that, hey, I'm taking this chance and I'm safe, I'm okay, it didn't hurt me, or I've learned something, or I've grown from it, then you're now helping that person to possibly take the same risk.
Such an important point. Yeah. So the word inspire, implies that it's an effect that I'm having on somebody else.
Right.
And so again, it is about inspiring audacity in myself, but it's also about inspiring it in others through my own example. And if I'm willing to at the very least talk about my experience and let people know, here's what I've done, here's what worked, here's what didn't work. Let me tell you about a time where I just completely crashed and burned, and what I learned from it. Through my example, I'm encouraging people to pursue that for themselves. Right. And so if I can inspire a team of people to be audacious in our pursuits, we have a much better chance of getting extraordinary things done.
Awesome. I love it. I tell you, Steve, it's A for Audacity. It's my favorite one, man. I tell you. I love it. P, we're talking about proof. Provide proof.
I get it.
Yeah. Provide proof is that final one in the framework.
So the thing is that all of this is well and good, but unless it gets results, what the hell's the point? So part of proof is that it's not enough simply to be conversant in these ideas and to talk a good game. We have to prove that we mean what we say. And we prove it through our results, sure, for one thing. And in my experience, if you cultivate love, if you generate energy, if you inspire audacity, if you hold yourself accountable to really being an example for all of this, the results will be there. This is all about the results. Right. But proof also means proving myself as a leader to you as a so-called follower. which is a little counterintuitive for some people.
Gotcha.
They need to prove themselves to me, right? Well, that's true too. But think of it this way: leaders go first. So I need to prove myself to you by making sure simply that my actions are congruent with my words, that I do what I say I will do, that I'm holding myself accountable to my own language, promises, etc. And I prove it through my action. I've proven that I'm not just talking a good game.
Right.
So proof happens on a number of different levels, but it does kind of bring us full circle, right? It's all in the proof. And then I like to think of Leap as an ongoing. There's a couple of metaphorical ways of thinking about it. It's a bit of an operating system.
Mm-hmm.
I also like to think of it as a framework.
Yep.
But if you can imagine anything that you're trying to do in your business or anywhere else for that matter, any project, any strategy that you're rolling out, any whatever, if you can cultivate the love for that,
right,
generate energy around the pursuit of it, inspire people to be audacious in getting it done, and prove that you're making progress, whatever it is that you're trying to do, you have a better chance of getting it.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I tell you, the part about proof that I really love is at the end of the day, you just can't argue the results. Like the facts are the facts. If it's in black and white, it's in black and white. And, maybe you don't want to believe it. Maybe you've always doubted it, but the proof is in the pudding, so to speak, right?
Yeah. Although, in this day and age, you'd think that all people needed to see were the facts and evidence, and that would take care of everything. But one of the things that we've proven together is that proof is a very subjective thing in the final analysis. So in the context of business, we do have very specific realities that have consequences. If we don't make money, we go out of business.
Right.
And so we can measure that. We can measure the bottom line. We can measure things like, margin and profitability and market share and all that.
Yep.
And we should. And what I'm suggesting to folks is that whatever it is that you're measuring as business people in the most objective way, by practicing love, energy, audacity, and proof, you'll see it show up in those measurements as well. So you can define proof however you want. If you want to define it in, prove it in terms of our profitability as a company, yes, I'm all for that. And by the way, this model has been around long enough, oddly, that we have some great case studies.
Sure.
We do have lots of evidence from companies that have applied this on a cultural level and have made it onto best place to work lists, have increased their revenue ridiculous. Just a company called Trailer Bridge, for example, who I talk a lot about nowadays. In fact, I just interviewed the CEO and head of leadership there for my podcast.
Uh-huh.
They have been applying this for quite some time. They turned the company around. Nice. They had 2 years in a row that exceeded the revenues for those 2 years exceeded the previous 25 years of the company combined. Wow. They're number one best place to work in the city of Jacksonville. Winning all kinds of awards. And they'll tell you that it's because they've essentially operationalized love, energy, audacity, and proof in the way they do business.
Wow.
So their proof for themselves, again, it's very measurable. Let's look at our revenue. Let's look at our profitability. Let's look at our employee turnover. Let's look at our customer scores. And all of them are very high and getting higher all the time. That's all we need as business.
Yeah. No, I get it. Hard facts. It makes total sense. Yes. You started with, when you've done a lot of work around love, right? As we've talked about, but you're not necessarily saying that love is, say, more important than the others. And maybe the next 3 or 4 books might incorporate audacity or incorporate proof or incorporate a bit more of energy. But you started with love. Why is that?
Yeah. So in one way of looking at it is, we could take kind of a compartmentalized approach and examine each of those four elements.
Sure.
Another way of looking at it is it really is all about love. It really is. Once you get that down, everything else takes care of itself. So one of the ways that I like to frame it up is that love generates energy, love inspires audacity, love requires proof. So it's very flexible in how we approach it. So for example, in the book Love is Just Damn Good Business, well, just to back up for a second, The Radical Leap was my first book.
Right.
It came out in 2004 in its first edition. So that's the first time that I talked about love, energy, audacity, and proof. Followed it up with The Radical Edge, went into a few nuances of it. Greater Than Yourself, as we talked about, is really what I consider to be an application of it.
Yep.
But then in the newest book, Love is Just Damn Good Business, the LEAP framework runs throughout the entire book. So it never goes away. It's my operating system. It's what I teach. It's what I coach people on. It's what we do in our consulting work when we help companies to apply it, sometimes over the course of several years. So it'll always be there in some form or another.
Right.
Because it's got lots of applications to it, and it is like an operating system. You can have one operating system and have 1,000 applications.
Sure you can. Yeah.
So, what next? We'll see. Actually, my next project is a real on the surface kind of a left turn. In that it's and it's somebody else's story.
Okay.
So I wrote a book with my friend JJ French.
Okay.
JJ is, you may not recognize his name, but you'll likely recognize the name of the band Twisted Sister.
Of course, sure.
And even if Twisted Sister doesn't ring a bell, you certainly know the songs "We're Not Going to Take It."
That's right.
And "I Want to Rock."
That's right.
So that's JJ French is the founder of Twisted Sister. So he's the founder of the band, the guitarist for the band, the manager of the band, and he's become a very dear friend over the last several years. And he's an entrepreneur. Okay. So I'm working on. We met at a conference.
Okay.
The connection between the two of us is we met at a conference. I gave a speech about LEAP.
Okay.
He stood up. He stood up during the Q&A to ask a question and basically said, "I'm in the music business, which is filled with people who, let's just say, do not exemplify what you've just been talking about.
Right.
And I've always believed that what you're talking about is the way to do business." Wow. So that's how we first connected. So anyway, I co-wrote his book with him. Gotcha. So it's his story in his voice. It's coming out at the end of I think summer of this year, 2021. It's called Twisted Business.
Awesome.
LEAP is not the framework in Twisted Business, but it definitely, it runs through it. It runs through it. Certainly it is audacious. That's for sure.
That is. When you said he stood up and during the Q&A, I thought you were going to say, "We're not going to take it," right? That's a response, but no. That's awesome.
Yeah, that's right. That's the subtitle. It's funny.
Go ahead. Know what you're going to say?
It was funny you say that because actually the full title of the book is Twisted Business, and the subtitle is "We're Not Going to Take It Anymore."
There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. That's a good one. That's a good one. And actually, I did see that Mr. French was on your podcast. Love is Just Damn Good Business. So I saw the mention there, and that's awesome. I'd encourage listeners to check out the podcast, check out your book. SteveFarber.com is your website. Steve, I'm so appreciative of you stopping by again. I hope we don't wait 10 years to do this a second time or a third time. A lot of fun. I always appreciate your insights. But really, your authenticity and ability to convey messages so resounding and strong, and I certainly appreciate that. And thank you for being here, Steve.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. And reach out anytime. I haven't moved from this chair in what, 11 months. So you know where to find me.
Yeah, there we go. There we go. Thanks.
It's always great talking with you, man. I really appreciate it.
For sure. Appreciate it, Steve. All the best. Back we are here on the podcast. Big time shout out to Steve for rolling through and stopping by and leaving so many golden nuggets of insight. It's super appreciated, and I'm certain our listeners took a ton from you. So thank you, my friend. I can't wait to do it again. I absolutely love the way Steve defined audacity. I thought it was great. It's a bold and blatant disregard for normal constraints in order to change the world for the better. Disregard for those normal constraints to change the world for the better. I absolutely love that. I repeatedly said on this podcast, on my social media, or when I speak to audiences, we all have the opportunity at our disposal to make this world a better place simply by letting go of fears, uncertainties, doubts, suspicions, and practice and exercising being audacious. That's powerful stuff. Hey, if you haven't registered for an email notification of the podcast, you can do so by heading over to my site, bestaudaciouslife.com. Enter your email address and you'll be immediately alerted every time new content comes out. Promise I'm not going to flood your inbox, or I'm not trying to sell you stuff. Just keeping you connected, keeping you in the loop. To our listeners, I appreciate you so much. Thank you for your ongoing support of the Audacious Living podcast. It's absolutely fantastic. So thank you, thank you, thank you. We've reached the end of an episode. So until next time, stay safe, be kind, show love to one another, and be audacious.
You've been listening to the Audacious Living Podcast, hosted by Audley Stevenson. If you enjoyed what you heard, be sure to like, subscribe, and share. Until next time, be audacious.